Have no fear, everybody. The fantasy duo is back to make sure you're dominating this upcoming draft. On today's episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, a very special guest and a little bit more of that Fantasy 2022 Draft Rewind. Happy Tuesday. Let's get right to it.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And on today's show of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, we have a special guest with us, returning guest as well, Blake Creamer, a part of the Apples Ginos crew, also host of the Cream of the Crop podcast. An absolute blast every single time he releases an episode. Glad to have you back on here, Blake. Thank you so much. He was also a part of our first inaugural Locked On Fantasy Hockey League. Did a pretty good job at that. What were you, top five, top three in the league?
Yeah, I think I was top two. I was top in the conference, but I got smoked in the playoffs by, a young mustached beauty. I don't know what happened there, but yeah.
Yeah, it was a good run in the playoffs, but he did pretty well, top three. Definitely secured a little bit of that prize money at the end, but that's what we're sort of doing on today. We're reliving the 2022 fantasy draft rewind, continuing with the third round. We started at round 6, worked our way down to round 3 at this point. Flip's here as well, your boy Flip Livingstone. I'm your host, Steele Roden, of course, on the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Starting off again with round 3, and Elias Lindholm at number 36th overall in our fantasy hockey draft. I'll throw it over to you, Flip, with Elias Lindholm.
Here's the thing with the entire situation with the Calgary Flames. This team has been so much in flux. A couple of years ago, we were ready to hang a real cup threat as a title on this team. Obviously, things have not worked out for Calgary fans. But when I look at Elias Lindholm, he still brings so much fantasy value. And to me, he just brings a lot of value on the ice. And I think the Calgary Flames forward group is very, very lucky to still have their number one center, considering there's been rumors out there that Lindholm's on the move. Holy cow. That whole arena might be on the move. There's been so many rumors in Calgary. 22 goals last year, 42 assists. Would you like to see that shot total come up 186 for sure? I really still like Elias Lindholm. I just honestly think, and this is what I'm excited to get Blake's take and your take, there's so much flux in Calgary. I'm really having trouble pegging what this upcoming season holds, and therefore I'm wary of how high I take Elias Lindholm. Am I okay around the 4th and 5th round? I think I am. Maybe a little later. 3rd round to me seems too high, but at a guy who puts up steady 60, 65, 70 points, I still think he brings a ton of value, even if we're unsure of what happens in Calgary this year.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting one for sure. In my opinion, like Lindholm at 36 was pretty high, even at, going into last season. Yeah. He was coming off an amazing season, 82 points in 82 games.
That's it.
So that's nice. But, last season, or the 82-point season, he was playing with John Gaudreau and Matty Tkachuk. Yeah. All right, this season, he was playing with Tyler Toffoli and the Doobie brother, Dylan Doobie. So, that like a lot of his regression came at even strength. And just to prep up for you guys here, I got a fun stat for you. Calgary Flames at even strength, they were 2nd overall in the entire league in Corsi 4 per 60. All right. Wow. So they were 2nd overall, but they were 2nd worst in the league in shooting percentage. What the? How? Yeah. Oh man, that's super snake bit, right? Their luck metrics were in the toilet. There's no question there. And I mean, as you said, to Flip, like there's some turmoil there in Calgary. I think Daryl Sutter, what a ding dong! Get the hell out of my sight. I think that affected a lot of what was going on there. Obviously, Huberdeau with his momentous downfall, and Lindholm was in there as well. So I just think right now there's a lot of reason to be kind of excited about Lindholm. Like I wouldn't have drafted him at 36 last season, but now I think because of this down season and the flux that's happening in Calgary there, I think you can get this guy at value next season, right? Because like you said, he's a contributor across the board.
And very quickly, Steele, before you take over, I think what happens and what Steele and I have really been trying to do, Blake, in this prep for our listeners for next season is remember that reach. Remember what happened the year before. You mentioned Lindholm and him going high in this past draft. He scored 42 goals. 40 goal scorers in the NHL are not exactly out there all the time. But you mentioned what else is going on around. What do the numbers indicate? These are all things that astute hockey GMs are digging into. Don't just look at the flashy big numbers, which 42 goals, hey, maybe you do take him at the back end of the 3rd round, and I don't hate it. But all those other things that you mentioned, Blake, factor in. And now with that down year, maybe it's the opposite situation. You can wait a little bit for him, grab him in a little bit of a later round.
And for me, I think this is just typical Elias Lindholm. Like, he's a very good player, and he played for 4 years with, Johnny Gaudreau, Sean Monahan, Matthew Tkachuk, and those guys in 2 of the seasons. Yeah, he put up 78 points and 82 points one year. But the other 2 seasons, 54 points, 47 points. I know one of them was only a 56-game season, shortened season because of COVID. But I think what we saw this past year from Elias Lindholm is typical of him and more accurate of his game and what his point production can be in the NHL. Like you said, his shot total dropped down to 186. That's the second highest. I think that's more accurate to his game as well. And then for Elias Lindholm, like you said, I think, round 3, 36 overall is way too high for me. I would feel more comfortable with round 6. I think that's a more accurate round for Elias Lindholm. His ADP was even 45.1, so he was getting drafted a lot earlier than I would have been taking him. But again, one of those reaches, and it just didn't work out, especially, again, losing those teammates, Matthew Tkachuk and Johnny Gaudreau. However, for the next player on this list, this is actually my draft pick in the fantasy draft, round 3. Steven Stamkos coming in at 35th overall, finished top 25 in fantasy points. I think a lot of people, when it comes to Steven Stamkos, they obviously in the back of their head is the injury concern, the injury history that he's had. I still believe he's a top fantasy asset in this league. I think round 3 is exactly where he should be falling in fantasy drafts and being drafted. Again, I understand the in the back of the brain, the injury history that he's had. And I think that's why he fell off. I think easily he could have been a 2nd round draft pick last year, but people were scared of potentially getting injured.
Yeah, the injury thing is something that's always interesting and maybe should be in the back of your mind for every single player you take. Don't forget that if there are inconsistencies there with remaining in the lineup, that's something that you're going to have to roll the dice on. But 81 games played in the past 2 years, he's been looking pretty healthy to me. The end of the day for me with Steven Stamkos, everything you said there holds water. It's how much playoff mileage is on the bodies of the core of this Tampa Bay Lightning team. But 84 points last year, 106 the year before, gets it done in the playoffs, gets it done in the clutch. And the other thing is Tampa Bay Lightning is another one of those teams that, maybe they have a slight regression. He still plays with Braden Point and Nikita Kucherov.
Yeah.
And aside from the historically good power play that the Edmonton Oilers had last year, which clicked at a 32% success rate, the Tampa Bay Lightning were right there behind the Toronto Maple Leafs as the best power play unit in the game. And that's led by Steven Stamkos. I'm taking a risk on Steven Stamkos in the 3rd round all day with that injury factor, but I want to hear what Blake thinks.
Yeah, no, I'm right in line with everything you guys are saying. That's a great point, Flip, about the playoff matches too. Maybe just, maybe putting people off of Stamkos, but I honestly don't really draft for injuries. To me, it's like you got to kind of take the best player available unless they're coming off some mega injury like right before camp and, it's a slow go. But Stamkos, he's good to go. But to me, this was even a down season for Stamkos. He regressed a little bit. Like he was great, no question there, but it was a down season to his standards. Right. I actually had him in the 2nd round. That's where I would like to see Stamkos go. Ooh. So to get him in the 3rd round, bang, that's major value to me. And I ended up passing on him. I think I got Pasta in the 2nd round. And then I took Timo Meier in the 3rd for like his multi-cat upside. But, Stamkos at this point, major value. If you look at his line mates again, like we talked about Elias Lindholm, Stamkos played with Point and Kucherov this season, but he had the lowest IPP of his entire career at 65% this last season. Steven Stamkos. The year before, he had the 2nd highest IPP he's ever had, and he was playing with Anthony Cirelli and Alex Killorn. That was his big season. So, we always are like, oh, he's playing with Kucherov and Point. Well, that's 3 roosters in the henhouse right there, and there's only so many touches to go around, right?
Hey.
So, there's something going on there, but I think it's a happy medium in between those 2 numbers. I think Stamkos is good to go, and at 35, my God, pick him up.
Yeah. And I think John Cooper does a really good job of interchanging those top 2 lines as well, mix and matching. Again, Cirelli, Stamkos, and whoever's playing on that wing, whether it be I know last year Alex Killorn was in there a little bit. Tanner Jeannot maybe got up there once or twice. There was a few guys that interchangeable, but for the most part, it does seem to be Braden Point, Steven Stamkos, and Nikita Kucherov on that top line.
Most definitely. The only thing when I look at this lineup, guys, and right before we go to break, because the rest of the episode, we're going to pick Blake's brain. We got to talk Thatcher Demko. We're going to talk JT Miller. A couple players near and dear to Blake's heart, near and dear to the trigger finger for my boy, Mr. Rodin. And we got a lot more to talk about after the break. But very quickly, when I do look at this lineup, injury concerns with Braden Point. Nikita Kucherov has injury concerns. Steven Stamkos, maybe not so much recently, but has been very much injured. A lot of minutes on Victor Hedman racking up. And then some of those key depth pieces now frittering away. The Killorns, the Ross Coltons, Andre Palat not there anymore. There isn't as much now to spread that out. Too much pressure on all those veterans. I don't know. Could be a bit of a powder keg. All I want to say, though, is today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Take your first swing at betting on the MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets, up to $200 back. That's right, just $20 down and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can be betting on everything from the money line to the total to who you think smacks that first dinger, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get that cash paid out instantly. There's no better place to bet on the MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Sign up today. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get up to $200 back in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. We are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find your favorite team from all 4 major sports leagues, including the NCAA, your team every single day. And thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Special guest, returning guest, Blake Creamer. Again, make sure you go follow and subscribe to his podcast, Cream of the Crop, part of the Apples and Ginos crew over there. They're doing wonderful things fantasy hockey wise and everything in between. So thank you again so much, Blake, for tuning in for today's. It just very coincidentally happened to be the 3rd round where we got 2 Vancouver Canuck players in here, and the boys from Vancouver, your guys, Thatcher Demko and JT Miller. Let's start with Thatcher Demko, though. And this one is going to be a very funny conversation because this guy put daggers in my back, left, right, and center this past year. And I couldn't take it anymore. I ended up dropping him right when he got injured. Didn't even want to look at him or think about him when he returned to action. But how do you feel about Demko this upcoming season, as well as for fantasy wise? Where do you think he should be drafted? Do you think he falls way down the leader or the draft board? How do you feel about Demko returning?
Yeah, I mean, it was a tale of 2 seasons for Demko for sure. He had a rough start, no question. I mean, he won just one of his first 10 games. What the frick is going on? Come on, buddy. And he allowed 3 or more goals in each start, buddy. Come on.
Last 17 games, though, looking pretty good.
Exactly. Yeah. Still tale of 2 seasons to me. Like the first 15 games, I think it was something like 3-10-2. Like garbage. You know what I mean? And he wasn't healthy. So he came in, he's not healthy. Then he got injured again. Not great. I think for me personally, I think next season we can expect the Thatcher Demko that maybe we expected this last season. That said, he is going to drop way down draft boards because of this garbage performance, and people might not look at the tale of 2 seasons. But I do want to throw something in there. Please. When I'm drafting in fantasy, I subscribe to a strategy called 0G, and I don't know if you guys know what that is, but it's basically like, don't waste draft capital on goalies until about the 10th round. So for me, the idea is that goalies are more unpredictable, and you can look at players like Demko, Markstrom, even Vasi and Shesterkin. They didn't really come close to their draft positions, right? Skaters are a bit easier to predict. So I think there's always a bunch of goalies that are available later on. Like if you think of guys like Ullmark and Georgiev and Vanacek and Gustafsson, those type of guys.
Great point, Blake.
Yeah, that said, I'm not drafting Demko unless he drops down to the 10th round. But I think he's going to be a value this season for someone who does draft him. I still think he's a second-tier goalie there, and I think he's going to be a lot better.
And big to your point, I think really is more of a 50-50 split share before, even 15 years ago in the NHL, even 20 years ago. Marty Brodeur is playing 65, 72 games. There's a real legit number one. The backup plays, on the back-to-back nights, or if the number one guy goes down. Now, teams are even look at what the Carolina Hurricanes might do this year.
Yeah.
There could be 3 goalies running in Carolina. So I think that really does speak to your point. And Steele and I have been preaching it. Our boy Michael Amato of Sportsnet's been preaching it. Unless you're really, really been burned and you're going to go out there and take like something like I did, Sorokin, in the 2nd round, it's bold, right? Like it might not pan out for you and you really could gotten a solid goaltender. Also, before I throw it over to Steele, because I know he's got some Demko tears that he needs to wipe away. You mentioned the tale of 2 seasons. That's the top of my notes right here for Thatcher Demko, because this is a goalie I'm not ready to give up on yet. And I do think this Vancouver Canucks team is still going to struggle defensively, but they're going to be better overall. And I think he's going to get some wins. Health is a factor again. 11-4-2 in his final 17 starts. And a .918 save percentage. Maybe we see something in between the first half and the second half of Demko. But even if it is in between, it's much better. And he's still a number 1 goalie, in my opinion.
And I also think we can expect the blue line in front of him to be a lot better this next season. They pretty much cleaned house except for Quinn Hughes. We were talking about this the other day. They add a few different guys, Carson Soucy. I think Quinn Hughes is literally the last guy on the blue line from last year for Vancouver.
Now.
Yeah, there's a few different new guys. So I think clearly just better in front of Demko as well. But 34th overall is way too high. I believe I took him in the 5th round in my other fantasy league. And again, taking goalies, like you just said, Blake, taking them too early is just sometimes very, very bad for your fantasy hockey team. I think 10th round to draft your first goalie might be a little too late because I'll start to worry about the goalies that are left over, because once one goalie goes, they just start to snowball and it goes like crazy. So, I probably won't draft Thatcher Demko again, but if he gets down to the later rounds, maybe becomes a 2nd or 3rd round, a 2nd or 3rd goalie in my draft selection. Jack Hughes, though, falling in at 33rd overall. At the very beginning, I thought this was too high. Again, the injury concern, the small body of Jack Hughes just made me skeptical of him being able to play an entire season. And did he shut me up real fast? 78 games played, 99 points, franchise record. And I'll leave this very quick and short. He's clearly a 2nd round draft pick for next season.
Blake, look, I know you listen to the show, but one of the things that Steele and I like to do is hold ourselves accountable for the incorrect takes. Steele knows I've been very, very high on this player, and it's not a bold take. I'm not trying to say I was digging into stats and I found a gem. Jack Hughes is a thoroughbred. Unfortunately, he had been very banged up. But right after the Connor McDavids of the world and some of those top elite skaters, I might even throw Jordan Kyrou in there, Jack Hughes can skate like the wind. And in today's NHL, if you can stay healthy and skate like he can and have the hands, you're going to have success. And honestly, I love this player. And given the format of your league, I think he could go even higher this year. And that's because of how good the New Jersey Devils now are. And the reason he can be so good is because he doesn't need to actually carry all that offensive load at such a young point in his career. Timo Meier is there. Jesper Bratt is coming out. Tyler Toffoli is there. Dawson Mercer is stepping out. This team is one of the most offensively balanced and potent already. We know the question marks late in the cage, but when it comes to Jack Hughes, and I'm going to turn it right over to you, Blake, 40 goals each year is my expectation. And now I'm expecting triple-digit point seasons from a guy that was, let's remember, a 1st overall and is only 22 years old headed into this season.
Yep, I agree with all that, Flip. This is a guy, to me, this was not a high pick. This was something, this is a guy I targeted in leagues because Yahoo's ADP on this guy was like 95, something like that. And in all the leagues I played in, this is where he was getting drafted. Like people were smart. Your listeners are smart. And they picked up this guy, I was going to try and get him the next round. I was going to see what happened, but it just didn't work. But 99 points in 78 games, bang. Come on. I think, this guy's definitely arrived. I don't think we're going to be seeing him at 33 even next season. Like you said, Steele, this guy's going to be early 2nd, maybe late 1st, depending on your format, right?
I agree wholeheartedly.
Check this out. Like this guy, all strengths last season, he was 6th overall in the league in shots on goal per 60. 6th. He was 9th overall in individual scoring chances for per 60. 9th. That's elite. You know what I mean? That's really elite. And he's also a beast on the power play. He had a 71% power play share there. And also, one last thing on this, New Jersey as a team, like you mentioned, Flip, they're stacked like crazy. I think they're going to regress positively with their team shooting percentage. So at all strengths last year, New Jersey was number 1 in the league in scoring chances for per 60. They were only 15th in the league in shooting percentage. So usually more scoring chances for equal a higher shooting percentage, right? And I just think New Jersey wasn't converting at the rate that they should have. So I think that's going to go up. That's going to bump up. So we're going to see even better fantasy performances from the top 6, including this stallion, Jack Hughes. So I think,
thoroughbred stallion. Right. Keep throwing out the horse references, babe. You know I'm here for it.
This man's a unit.
Hey.
Yeah, hand up. My bad. That was my bad on not believing in him. I will say, I think first round is a little bit of a stretch. I think mid-second round is exactly where Jack Hughes should be falling. But hey, if you want to reach a little bit in the first round, take him there. All go for it. It's all yours. We are going to be moving on. We will get to JT Miller next and finish off with Mika Zibanejad. But thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day, Monday through Friday, 7 o'clock in the morning is when you got to be tuning in on your way to work, at the gym, whenever you want. Tune in, hit the subscribe and the follow button. Your boy Flip Livingstone and Steele Roden with returning guest Blake Creamer. Again, make sure you go follow Blake on his podcast, Cream of the Crop, doing wonderful things over there as well. And again, thank you so much for being on today's episode. JT Miller, though, another Vancouver boy in the NHL, having some good seasons, really good seasons, 82 points this past year in 81 games, 99 points in 80 games the year prior. And I might get some hate for saying this. Here we go. I don't even care, but JT Miller is a first-round draft pick. He just is. Whoa. He just is.
Wait, and he's a first-round draft pick and Jack Hughes is not? That's not accurate.
It is accurate. It is very accurate. And again, I might get hate for saying that, and I hate saying it myself. But JT Miller, again, it's not sexy to say, but he is a first-round draft pick. He has been the last 2 seasons. Again, 30 goal scorer, 80-plus points, 200-plus shots, 200-plus hits, 50 blocks, 60 penalty minutes. He's got 5 shorthanded goals, 30 power play points, pretty much does it all. I don't even care that Jack Hughes had, 16 more points than him. He finished, I think he was top 7 in fantasy points this past year.
It's one of those things, Steele. Look. Yeah, go ahead, Blake. Go ahead. You take this one, Blake. You take that.
Oh, sure. You'll get it there, Flip. Don't worry. We got to put this
I'll
man
take the sloppy thirds. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's nice. I think depending on your format, Steele, I think that you could maybe argue that. I think first round's a little rich, but definitely second round, no question. Second to third round, I think JT Miller is perennial. Like that's where you should be getting him. Cats leagues, obviously, he's a little bit higher because he bangs. He does that, right? But this was a tale of 2 seasons as well. Just any Vancouver Canuck in general, right? It was the Boudreau era and then the Tocchet era, and things changed. The team looked different, right? So Miller, to me, he got stuff done. I think this season here, the last one where he got 83 points, I think that's kind of his floor. I think that's what we can expect. And I think 99 is his ceiling. So it's going to be somewhere in between there with amazing periffs. So I think, again, to your point, Steele, second round for sure. If you get him in the first round, it's not a whiff. It's just, I think you're wasting a little bit of draft capital there. And the big difference between him and Jack Hughes, in my opinion, is the advanced metrics, right? The shot generation, the chance generation. Jack Hughes, crazy, elite on those. Miller, not as much, right? He's obviously got some great power play performances, and he's just good, but he also plays a ton of minutes. Jack Hughes plays 18 minutes. Miller plays like 21, right? So if Miller's ice time goes down, so do the points, right? Because he's not generating the chances or the shots at the same rate. That's my opinion. But, I think he's going to have a great season again. And, if you pick him up in the second round, you're looking good. I think third round Miller, that's insane. That's mega value. So I'm in on Miller. I'm looking for him.
Is there a Vancouver Canuck player that you aren't expecting to have a good season, Blake? Because so far it's all, roses and sun and, rainbows. No, I'm kidding. I'm chirping you. But
don't kill my sunshine. All right. I need
my bad. Right? Look, we're jaded, bitter, angry Leafs fans over here. So, we don't all, everyone's not smoking that BC bud out west, Blake. It's not all happy here in Ontario.
We're tortured fans.
I'm trying, pal. But here, look, at the end of the day, my concern with JT Miller is the sample size. This man was in the NHL to his 27th year on his age, and he was putting up 46, 47, 58, 56, 43 points. And then he steps out of nowhere, and he has 2 good seasons. Am I not trying to knock it? No. And Steele and Blake, you're both on point. The peripherals are beasts. He's one of those banger league beauties that you love having in there because he's also been pretty, the last 2 years, he's only missed, 3 games total. So I really like that angle, but I'm taking Jack Hughes all day over him in Dynasty and Keeper. Of course, we don't even need to argue that factor. So the format is definitely where I think you can take some heat on that, Steele, because in other leagues, sure. But in Keeper Dynasty, you're definitely wrong. You're taking Jack Hughes over JT Miller all
Yeah, we're talking
day
Keeper
long.
Dynasty League, but we're not in a
This is what you
Keeper
always have to
Dynasty
throw out that format. If you're saying you said all day absolute, pal, I'm going to come at you because it's not all day absolute. It's a bit of a bold take, but JT Miller has been.
I don't think it's that bold of a take. And
I know you don't, but you're wrong.
If you look at the last 4 seasons, though, like you're saying that he's only put up 45, 50 points a season. Like look at the last 4 years, 72 and 69 games, 46.
No, I said the start of his career. The start of his career.
He's
where
a little bit of a
5
late
straight
bloomer,
years of under 60
points.
points.
You know what? I'll prove you both wrong next season when I take JT
Let's
Miller
run this
in the
back.
second round.
Under 80 points for JT Miller. Let's make a bet. I'm taking the under all day.
No, take that, Steele. You got to take that, buddy.
Yeah, he's playing with Elias Pettersson. He's going to feed him the puck every.
He has played past tense. We don't know where he plays this year, do we? So banking on where he's already playing in July is a bit of also of a bold move. But go ahead.
I'll tell you what, boys. Give me one shot here. That the reason Miller got better is deployment, pure and simple. Like last season he had Tampa Bay,
which you cannot predict.
But I mean, you can a little bit. Like he's playing 20 minutes for over 4 seasons, right?
Yeah,
so he's a part of that plan. So
Good point.
that's where he's gonna get his points. But under 80, I don't know, Flip. I don't know, my man.
You know me. I'm just trying to get under Steele's skin. Now that would be a much older prediction.
Over 80 points.
Look, this is why you got to stick to your guns, just like Steele is, which I give him props for all day. It's my prediction. It's his prediction. But also, Steele, how many predictions come out correct for you? How many come out for me on the betting front? Anyway, let's talk about Mika Zibanejad. I'm not drafting him at all. He's poo. Rangers are poo. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
This is actually a player that I drafted in my other fantasy league. I've drafted a lot of these players on this list so far, but Mika Zibanejad coming in at, number 31st overall in the fantasy league. He's a power play specialist, 20 power play goals, 19 power play assists. To me, the fact that he fell to the 3rd round was a little shocking. I still think he's a end of the 2nd round draft pick. He does a lot, and a lot of his fantasy value comes on the power play and special teams actually, because he's a dual threat, dual eligibility on penalty kill and power play. So I love Mika Zibanejad. I always try to draft him whenever I can in fantasy draft leagues. And Blake, how do you feel about Mika?
Yeah. Love this player too, but I didn't get him anywhere. And I think it's going to happen again this season. I was fading centers a lot. I feel like there's a lot of good centers that can be had later on. So Zibanejad kind of just went by the wayside, but he's a great player. He's a really great player. And you're never going to draft
He's
this
no
guy
JT Miller.
I'll agree with that.
Too soon.
As well, but he's a little bit more offensive. So you're never going to be sorry you drafted this guy. But to me, 39 power play points. Thank you very much, my good man. That's a career high for him. Also, his IPP was the 2nd highest mark of his career as well. So, he's driving play. His on ice shooting percentage was a touch low, at even strength. So I think that could bump up a bit. So that means more points for him, right? Everything that Zibanejad is doing is sustainable to me. So I feel like this is kind of what we can expect unless there's a big injury or a trade or something like that. He's got a huge power play share on that top end unit giggity in New York. So I think he's going to have similar power play numbers. And I'm probably still going to fade. He's going to get faded by guys like me just trying to get value centers later on. But it's a beauty, and I think it's sustainable.
I respect that take, actually, Blake, and this is why I straight up love having you on the show. You bring some of the fantasy aspects that I think some of the more, no offense to people who are starting out in fantasy, you all got to start somewhere. But some of these things that Blake is mentioning, if you can get on these now and put them under your cap as your process for analyzing your team and your draft choices, you're going to be way ahead of the game. So make sure you also check out Blake on Twitter. Give him a follow all day long. But what I wanted to say about Zibanejad, because I think all 3 of us are right on par. I'm not going to get down the rabbit hole of, the Korpisalo take I had in the playoffs that you guys didn't like. But my thing with him is, and I'm curious about what you both have to say, is when players now start to hit that 30-year-old number and up, I'm just a little, I got a little bit of a concern over, are we going to start to see regressions? It's just natural. The bodies start to break down. He's not been a guy who's dealt with injuries, but maybe that starts to happen. I know you don't factor that in, Blake, but headed into being a 30-year-old now, I'm just going to start to keep my eye out for, can some of these players around that age group still maintain, because he's elite, right? I'm not talking about looking at guys who bring 30 or 40 points at 30. You're looking at a guy at 90 points who you are wasting capital on your draft on. So that's my only concern with Zibanejad, but it's way down the list because I'm still fine with taking him in the first 5 rounds. First 3 is bold for me. I would maybe take him. I'm fine in the 4th, but I don't think taking him in this round was too much of a reach. What do you think on that, Steele?
I don't think it was a reach. Again, I probably would have drafted him for even next year in the late second
91
round.
points. You can't deny 91 points.
You can't deny. And I'm not as skeptical. I'm not as scared as the age maybe.
No, I'm not. It's just one of those things that I will start keeping in mind. That's the only thing I can think of for this player, really.
I'm not like Mika Zibanejad's 30, JT Miller's 30, like Brad Marchand's 36, Bergeron's 36, Sidney Crosby's 35. Like there's still guys who are 35, 36, 37 that bring a ton of fantasy value. So the fact that he's 30 does not affect me whatsoever.
I really appreciate that you're cheesed about what I said about JT Miller, but if you're trying to compare anyone to the longevity of Sidney Crosby,
I was comparing their ages.
I'm just saying it's one of those things that if you know what you're talking about, which I don't know about what Steele's saying now, you got to keep some of these things in mind. That's all I'm saying, because otherwise Mika Zibanejad is definitely still a stud. And at the end of the day, that Rangers power play was 7th best in the league. And we love what's going on in New York. The back end especially, I think, is the key to the forward success. Keandre Miller, Adam Fox, Trouba. We know Shesty at times last year was a little up and down. I actually think I'm fine taking the New York Rangers as one of my, preseason threats for a cup. And that all runs through Mika Zibanejad up front. And at the end of the day, 91 points, 39 goals, Blake.
I love it. You know what? I just did a recent episode on my own pod about kind of like an old man squad. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I was doing guys 32 and older, but it's an interesting point, just to your point, because yes, Flip, you have to keep it in mind, but I think you keep it in mind and then you think other fantasy GMs are keeping it in mind as well. Yeah. So you might be able to get these guys at value. Like I was talking about 100%. Guys like Pavelski and, other like even Blake Wheeler for the Rangers here. He's going to be a distinguished gentleman this year. So I like looking at guys like that at value. You got to give him that value. Obviously, we're talking about Zibanejad in the 3rd round here, so you got to be a bit more careful with your picks. But yeah, I like that thought, and then I like taking advantage of it.
Hey,
taking advantage, and you mentioned my boy over there, Joe Pavelski, getting it done at what's his age? Flip 45.
I think him and Giordano are celebrating their 50th birthday this year. But
they're
me with the numbers.
Old man Withers.
Old man Withers in the NHL getting it done. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Make sure you're tuning in Monday through Friday, 7 o'clock in the morning. Eastern time is when you can find all of our episodes. Make sure you're following our boy over there, Blake Creamer at Cream of the Crop Podcast, a part of the Apples and Ginos crew as well. Give a shout out to him. Love everything he's doing over there. And thank you so much again for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I and special guest Blake Creamer. Good luck with all your summer bets out there. And we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.